Everyone, this next suite of letters is our sort of devil stretch, the lowercase s, a, and g. We're going to take each one of those as an individual per video, so let's start with maybe the worst of them all, the lowercase s. Just like we've done in the past, to make our lives easier, we're going to duplicate some successes from past letter forms. In this one, we're going to start with the s and the lowercase c, which we did in the last video. Basically, we're going to start by copying the entire lowercase c into that lowercase s. Then I'm going to grab that bottom half, Command X to cut it, Command V to paste it back, and I'm going to mirror it to that left. Then I'm going to get my terminals so they're in line with each other, or not our terminals rather, but our stress axis. I'll bring these straight down. I'll bring those up a little bit. Maybe I moved this over too far, so I'm just going to get this sitting so it feels like where the top and bottom of an S might be. And then with my pen tool, I'm going to complete this path and that one. I'm going to join this one with that one. And that'll give me the starting ground for my lowercase s. Looks like these handles didn't get held there, so again, Option and click on that path to bring those back in. And now I have the bones of an S to start with. In many cases, these points are going to take a lot of finagling, and we're going to have to work through many iterations and many versions of this to get this to where we want to be. We may even have to add handles on that spine up there. So most of what we're going to be doing is working through this, trying to get this spine to be working in the middle there, joining these two things together. When we're working on this S, we're trying to get that spine or this sort of diagonal stroke in the middle to be the same weight as our other thick portions of our font. That can mean moving these handles around, trying to make sure that they're going to be in a place we want them to be. You can choose if you want a strong diagonal, so this is a fairly strong diagonal. We can move those points further away for a strong diagonal. Or you can get them to be more horizontal, where we move these points closer together to get a more horizontal shape. When we're thinking about this too, may also be helpful to bring in something like our lowercase o. With our lowercase o added as a component, we can add two of these. So I might hold Shift to add one there. And then I'll bring this one down until it overlaps in the middle there. And with both of these selected, I can bring it up to a point where now this is telling me where the center of my letter form is. So if I'm looking at my current S, my crossbar is far too low, or my spine is far too low. So I want to bring it up. I'm going to work to manipulate these points to bring it up into something where it's cutting through that middle portion there. With that done, then it's just a game of getting these curves and these strokes looking like they're going to do something well for us and looking like they're going to function quite intentionally. By adjusting these points and using some of our hotkeys, like holding that Option key down, we can get to a point where this starts to look like at least a half decent S. For our typeface, it's pretty circular. This is far too smushed at the top there, so I'm going to bring him down. Our axis here needs to stay in that center spot, so we'll bring this over and we can push some of these corners out here. I want to make sure that it feels natural and feels well rounded through there, and I'm going to make sure I'm grabbing these points and keeping them at those apexes of those curves. And I'm going to get as close as I can to a really lovely finished S before I try to add any points in that spine. Eventually, we might add a couple points there. Some type designers will add points here and here. Others will add a pair. So you can add a pair of points there, there, and there, and there. And sometimes it can be helpful too if you want to keep those smooth to delete that point in that center there, but still make it a joined path. So by double clicking these, it means that if I move this path up, it's staying straight. If I move it down, it's also staying straight. What that can do is allowing me to move and just thicken out the spine on its own. It also gives me a little bit more control over those corners there, so I can decide if I want a thicker spine, a thinner spine, or how else my S needs to work. I hope that you're enjoying the video so far. This is a mid-roll just to ask, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do, as that's the best way to support the videos on this channel. If you already have subscribed, be sure to like the video and comment or tag somebody who might benefit from them. Now, back to our regular programming. Now, continuing to work through this character, I want to pay attention to my axis. In all my other letter forms, I've kept that axis straight up and down, and the tendency in S's is to lean it one way or the other. Right now, this lowercase s is leaning to that left. If I look at where this axis is, it sort of cuts through here and is touching right about here. So it's just a little bit slanted back. I can move it forward by bringing some of these points and this top half to that right a little bit. I can also help him out by pulling up this tail. We haven't adjusted this tail at all. So similar to our E and our C, I can make sure that my terminals up here and down here are ending in underneath or above the other parts of that letter form. Still looking at this will need a lot more work through here, but this is our sans serif version. So we're gonna get to a point where it's at least mildly respectable. Now I've sorted out my axis problem. The curves are a little wonky still. It's a little bumpy through this top bottom here. There's something strange going on through there as far as the weight goes, but it's fairly close. What we'll do next is we'll copy it and paste it onto our serif layer. Now serifs in the S work differently than some of these other letter forms. To give us a head start, we're going to go and grab that serif from another letter form, maybe this lowercase d where we've worked on it before, and we'll paste it in here. Now, this bottom left portion of the S doesn't have any serifs on it yet, so we'll start there, and then we'll go in and we'll add it to this top bit that sort of has this ink swell at the end. What I'll need to do is rotate this. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees and then flip it. So that means I've got my serif out here doing what a serif needs to do, and this may even give me an idea of what needs to happen in my letter form. Looking at this, I'm going to straighten out this serif that may have got manipulated during that lowercase d rendering. And then I can think about what happens if I just match what's already happened in the past and bring that up. We can see that my paths aren't quite working right, so I'm going to go up and say filter, correct those path directions so that it's adding it as one letter form. And that's probably too big as a serif. So I'll bring these back down a little bit, and I can bring all four down. And now, as I'm looking at this serif, there's some different things that I think I want to do with it. Instead of doing this, I think I'm going to flip that back up, so I have an idea of what I want that point to end on, so I can match that serif up there. And then I might even redraw some of this down here so it matches what we did in our lowercase t. If you remember, in our lowercase t, we had this round curved bit through here. And that might be a nice detail to pull into our lowercase s. So if I bring this point up to there and start to match some of that downward energy from what this serif is doing, I can delete that point really quickly. And then I can work my way through some of these other points. I'll know that I want a point down there. So we might just draw this whole thing as a new shape or something that's added on to this lowercase s. I'm going to time warp through this bit because it's going to take me a minute to do it, and I think it's going to be most beneficial for you to just see the results, then watch and listen to the process. And we're back. So what I did was add a few points to that path that was already the existing S, and I modeled it after that serif that we brought in from that lowercase d. You can see that if I were to add a component like the lowercase r and turn it on its side, then we're going to end up with something similar to that lowercase s. So now we have the same tonality as the serifs coming in through this terminal here. Bringing this in again, I forgot about this detail that we're putting in that cup of that serif, and that might be a nice detail to pull into our lowercase s. So I'll add a point here, and I'll add that cup to match what we're doing in some of our other letter forms. So with that matched, we have the bottom half of our S, and overall, he might be a little wide, so I'm just going to narrow him out a little bit. Again, this is why the lowercase s can take so much more time than other letter forms, is because he has a lot going on. There's a lot to work through and get through with this letter form. I'm going to adjust some of these things while I'm still thinking about it. And then we're going to go into adding this serif to that top part as well. Just like we've done before, we can copy this time around, and we'll paste it, which will put it in the same spot, and we can just move it out. And then on this portion, we'll cut it out. So Command X to cut it out. Then with this selected, we can flip it a couple of times and just stick them right back on there. As soon as those points touch, they'll create a new path. And we can see that these ones didn't quite touch. We'll put them together and they'll make their own path. Now we can see how wonky this S is because it didn't quite match what was going on before. So we'll have to work through this. We'll adjust some of these curves. We'll make sure that our S does everything that it needs to do. And here we'll actually bring this serif up a little bit higher. And we can adjust what this curve is doing through here. Maybe we can make this point a little bit shallower. And we're going to keep adjusting until it feels right. It feels like a nice balanced upright S. As I warned at the beginning of starting this letter form, it can take a long time to sort through all the details of this lowercase s. But don't be discouraged at it taking a long time. In fact, oftentimes I think the longer a letter form takes, the more elegance it's going to have, the more attention it is, and the more worthy your typeface is going to be once it's finally done. I'll continue to work on this as you go on and work on your lowercase s as well. Before we moved on, I wanted to show you where I ended up with this S and how I ended up getting there. When we left, I was still working on the serif version of the S, which I can find by tapping up here. Now, working it through, I was never going to get to it by looking at the character on its own, and our tendency is to just look at our characters on our own. At this point, with difficult letters, it can be useful and helpful to have the collection to work with. Earlier in the video, we talked about type as a system, or at least thinking about a theme that runs throughout your typeface. When you have a collection of letters to pull from, it can be easier to see the right answers and the wrong answers, or answers that are less successful. What I ended up doing was typing out this random sequence of characters that I already had. I was just finishing off and putting the S between characters like the N and the M and the O, characters that I know are working. Also putting it next to the C and the E and other characters that we've just finished or that we know are working. And then picking one in the middle there to manipulate to help us get to where it ended up looking pretty good. Now, I've made it a little bit narrower so it can have a nice slant through the middle there. It was too thick when we were working on it before. And I opened up this terminal a little bit. So this terminal is now just at a slight diagonal, which gives us a little bit more space in that aperture and helps us identify that this is the top and that's the bottom. In the sans serif version, we did the same thing. We had manipulated it before, and if you scroll back in this video, you'll see that the lowercase sans serif s was much wider, so I narrowed it down to match that serif version. After it was narrowed down, I went in and I duplicated the terminal we had at the top here and brought them down to the bottom, and so that the top didn't feel like it was going to overweigh that bottom part. Looking at it now, you can see just how closely related to that lowercase c it is, how it speaks to the same visual language as the F, and we could type some R's in here to get it looking like something in those options. And like I said, just tapping and using a bunch of the characters that we have that we know are working, we can start to bring in and look at it in relationship to our other characters. That's one of the reasons that we put off some of these more difficult characters till the end, so that we can see it as a collection. And as a collection, you can start to see what's working, what's not working, where we have too much weight, where we don't have enough weight, and it starts to look like a typeface. Thanks for watching, and as always, I hope you were able to gain something along the way, even if it's just a hotkey or how to move some points around that is different than what you may have otherwise known. Be sure to subscribe to the channel for more videos coming out every single week, and comment or tag or share it with some other designers who you think would design some awesome fonts.